let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, fetism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today on the show, we've got a very special guest. Today we have Miss Ivy Davenport herself.
Oh!
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you. How are you?
Doing good. We are fucking honored to have you on, babe, because you are just a standout icon in the world of everything fetism. I mean, listen, we've talked about it on the podcast 50 million times. Like, the division between, like, gaining and fetism sometimes is so severe that it's almost like, who are people? What go on? No clue. But even on our side of the fence, everybody heard of Ivy Davenport, so... This is a fucking honor. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And listen, today we're doing something a little bit fun because, dear listeners, as you may know, I talked about this at the time, there was a little documentary that aired here in the UK on Channel 4 about a year or so ago. It was called Sex Actually with Alice Levine. It was a part of a docu-series. I was very honored to be approached and to take part. And Miss Ivy Davenport also took part, showing us the glory that is the behind the scenes of the Fee production schedule. So I figured we can come in today, chit-chat about that experience, give a little behind the scenes tea, and maybe explore a little bit about what you've got going on yourself. So Ivy, babe, are you ready to get into it?
I am so ready.
Oh, fabulous. So listen, talking about the project itself as a sort of kickoff point, how did you first become aware of the opportunity to be a part of it?
So they reached out to me on Instagram and told me a little bit about it and asked if I'd be interested. And I was, however, the show was a lot about relationships, which I don't have. So it wasn't, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be great. I don't know. We'll see. And eventually it kind of, the whole thing just sort of turned into me like helping to kind of like connect them to other people. And I wasn't going to be as involved as I was, but then things kind of took a turn and there I was, part of the episode.
I mean, in fairness, I think it happened a little bit the same with me. They reached out to me, and I know they reached out to a couple of other people as well. I was very skeptic at first because I think we talk about this every time we do a review episode, right? Every other fucking docu, film, TV bullshit thing is typically exactly that. It's some fucking nonsense, putting tuba music under fat people, making people look crazy. And so everybody I know who considered it looked at it askance and said, no, ma'am, not for me. And I told you about this at the time, Tim. Like, I grilled them in the message. I was like, I will permit you to meet me for a drink, and I've got some questions for you. And they were like, sure, okay. And I fucking let them producers have it when I met up with them in Soho, because I was like, you need to understand exactly what it is you're dealing with and what the back history of all this is. And I was very impressed by how much research they'd done, because my first question was basically, what do you think you know about the documentary approach to this subject? Just give me the highlights. And they were like, well, it's not been handled very well in the past. I said, And they said, this is what we're running into. We're not necessarily getting a lot of no's. We're getting like 90% unanswered, 9% death threats. People who are just like, don't talk to me, don't you even look in my direction. And that's what kind of prompted them to be like, this is a very interesting outlier response. Why is this happening?
Girl, you didn't tell me that part.
Did I not?
No, you didn't tell me that part. Not about the like them saying they were getting death threats. Shit.
Well, obviously, like that's kind of the scope of it, right? Like there was people doing that, but there was also people being like, if you so much as send me another message, I will report you to Instagram, I'll find your business, I'll report you to my lawyers. Like people were going in. And like, here's the thing. I can't really fault them because
Oh no.
as we've covered on this podcast, most reviews that we fucking do, it's scraping the bottle. What did you say, Tim? It's like it's a race to the bottom?
Yeah, it's a race to the bottom. Yeah.
Like it's not good. So it is understandable why people would have a hesitation to take part in a project. And did you feel any major hesitations on your part, Ive?
Huge. I've been approached to do a lot of documentaries, a lot of talk shows, a lot of just different, magazines, whatever. Because I've been modeling, producing, whatever since like 2004. So over those years, and at that point, like back then, it was all talk shows that wanted to put feeties and fetuses on. And I've turned down most of them because I've seen what the media usually puts out in terms of fetus documentaries, articles, whatever, and it's never good. But I did one the year prior to Sex Actually that went really well. It was another UK documentary, and it went really well. The people from it treated me like a human, and I was really happy with how it came out. So I was a little more open to the Sex Actually people when they contacted me, but I also definitely gave them, I grilled them a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Tim, I know at the time I was like leaning on you heavily for this because I was like, obviously, if I end up doing anything with this, I'm in it. I need someone to like let me know if you're seeing anything sideways. I mean, when
Yeah.
you and I were talking about it at the time, what was your impression of the project?
Well, from the way that and I know you, and I know how tenacious you are, and how you will go after someone and grill them for the information. So once you told me how you felt about it and that they seemed like they were on the level, I, like I said at the time, I supported it completely. And I thought that anything that is a good representation of who we are is exactly what we need because we've had so much shitty representation over the years that I just had a good feeling that it was gonna be something that was worth it.
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I was curious, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit in the instigation of this podcast because the fact that we put this out there on like a public network for distribution to anywhere that civilian people of any kind could listen to it, right? Obviously, people are sort of like, why would you do that? But the whole point is all the conversations we're having are about subject matters relating to gaining and fetism that everyone needs to hear about and needs to learn about. And so there's an element to which being asked, and obviously I was one of a number, like that's fine, made me feel like, okay, I must be putting myself out there in the right way that people are listening and receiving. Because when I actually talked to them and they were like, oh, yada yada, what are your general thoughts on gaining? And I did say, oh, I have a podcast, and they chimed in, oh, is that Thicc Radio podcast? Like they'd heard of us and they'd listened to a couple episodes. I was like, ah ha ha ha, this is evidence, proof of pudding. Pudding.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, like people are listening. Um, and so just as a quick, like putting it out there to anyone who, I don't know, because like there are people, I know people who listen who do like other projects and other bits and pieces. If you've got any thoughts about like whether or not people are listening in, it's very possible that they are, right? Like sometimes you don't know who the audience is. And I think it's always good just to be mindful that people consume what we put out there. It's good to consider the quality of what we talk about, what we present, what we produce. And I mean, on that point, Ivy, I've had the pleasure of looking at some of the content that you produced, and god damn, girl, you know what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
I mean, can I
Uh,
ask, as someone who has been the model and done as much as you have, do you find that like it's from those experiences that really informed how you like to produce and how you do what you do on that side of things?
yes, definitely. And I've shot for a couple other producers, and I've like sat in on other producer shoots, and that has given me a lot of ideas as to like how to run my business, how to, you know, kind of figure things out. And my personal experiences have definitely helped. And I don't know, I've always been like a creative type, so some of it was just kind of like second nature, I guess.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like when it comes to the podcast, again, Tim, you and I have talked about this, like having done a bit of film and radio in the past, I studied it, I've done some of that. It gives you that information to say, okay, I know the base skill set, I can take it into this new medium. How do I put my own spin on it to, first of all, give it my own flair, meet the needs of the recording, but also create something that is of quality? Because I don't know, girl. Sometimes I feel like I look at what other people are producing for different content platforms, shall we say, and it's a bit like, I get it. You have an iPhone, but you couldn't have turned the light on. You couldn't have run a filter on that. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. And like, I am definitely, some of my early stuff, I am so guilty of just like, like not thinking about that kind of stuff. But, as time's gone on, I've learned, like, okay, it's time to upgrade the camera, time to upgrade the lights. Like, let's figure out sound. Let's do what we can to, make a better production, because if I'm watching something, I want to be watching something that's quality. And I kind of, go with what I'm looking at and see like, okay, how can I make my stuff look more like that, or be just of a higher caliber?
I love hearing that, and I do think it's interesting, right? Like there's a definite there's a definite angle that I think people don't consider when they produce their own content. Like you are also the producer, you are responsible for the look, the vision, the story, all of those different elements. And I think it's good to talk a little bit more about that, right? Like a production is more than just sitting in front of a camera doing a thing. And also with what you produce, it's very rarely static. You've got multiple camera setup, you've got scenes, you've got an evolution, a storyline, a narrative. I don't know, I kind of wish more people would endeavor to push their own content a little bit more. But personal
It's a
request.
I
realm that I
agree.
definitely know that I want to step into when we finally are, we have our opportunity to do so, because like that's where my creative side is going to come out. Like I would love to, and I'm going to be starting green like everybody else. I wish that I could like sit in on like how to direct a porn or something like that. Like how to be the, like what angles work best, how to take control of the set, like because I totally want to step into that producer role when given the opportunity.
Well, it's a good thing we're connecting here and now. So, after this call, talk to Miss Ivy and make a little plan. Um, but also that's like the world of any kind of sex narrative, sex production. I feel like sometimes feels like it's behind certain things, and yet with the rise of OnlyFans and Patreon, people feel like they're stepping into the niche, but it's not the people with the know-how doing the thing, so it just feels like there's this weird disconnect. I don't know, because I'm not in that world. Like, I don't know the story. But I mean, do you feel like there is a natural evolution from people producing their own content on these types of platforms to maybe doing a bit of what you're doing now?
Sometimes. I feel like, nowadays, like we were saying, it's like anyone who I mean, you don't even have to have an iPhone to make your own content. I know people out there that are using their Androids to do their clips, do their whatever. But as long as you have like a quality phone, you can produce your own content. And I think where a lot of people get tripped up is that they think that it's just like as simple as, pulling out the phone, pushing record, and eating a cheeseburger. And a lot of people, I don't think, ever really move past that stage because they're not making the money that they want. They think it's going to be like instantly just like, piles of money. Or they don't get the response they're expecting, because there's so many people and you have to market yourself like crazy to even get acknowledged. So I think that people, before they get to the point where they would start producing, they just kind of fall out. And also, I'm really, really fortunate. I live in Florida, the St. Pete area, And I moved here because in America, St. Pete is pretty much the Hollywood of the fetish industry. So yeah, right. So I have access to dozens upon dozens of local models that I can hire. It can be Monday, I can have a girl cancel at 9 a.m. and by 12:30 I have a different girl in my studio. Which I couldn't do that elsewhere. And so other people don't have that same opportunity to be able to, hire outside talent. Like that for me, getting started and being a producer, the hardest part was figuring out how to hire outside talent, where to find them, and also having them trust me that they can come to my set and be safe and have a good time.
Honestly, that part, like, I sometimes feel like, as much as I love the openness that some people have when it comes to producing content, people can really forget sometimes that there is a sense of safety and a sense of wellness that needs to be respected for talent. Um, that I don't know if a lot of people really think about that. And obviously, we try to talk about that on the podcast. Ivy, before this recording, we talked about measures that we like to try and take to protect people in the realms that we operate in. And I don't know, I just feel like all of those elements are very important to consider. And coming back to that Sex Actually episode, what was that situation like for you when it came down to safety and respect and those types of elements that normally you're having to do for other people, but now other people are having to do for you?
Um, they were so good about all of that, honestly. Like I was really impressed with the way that they ran things, especially given the situation that we were in with our segment, which so long story short, the focus was supposed to be on another couple. Something happened where the couple couldn't get together for the show. We find this out on like Thursday and they're supposed to be filming on Friday. So the whole scope of our segment changed. So it was not going to be about me. It was going to be about someone else. But at the last minute, they're like, okay, we're here in America. We are ready to go. And we don't have our person anymore. So they were in total upheaval, and even in spite of like everything basically falling apart 24 hours before it was supposed to start, they were still so respectful, so kind, so professional, and so just like I knew they were very stressed, but I couldn't feel it.
I love that. And I think that's also reminiscent of my own experiences. The original plan in the show was to, I think, similar to how there was some scenes that were demonstrated from the recording, there was going to be some scenes of me and another gay gainer having like a gainer hookup where we would have been like
Mm-hmm.
in certain clothing, doing certain activities, yada yada. And I was down for that. And my friend was also down for that. But then because of they were in town for a certain period, they only had a certain number of days, and then they were like, oh, actually, I'm not going to be able to make that work. And they were very apologetic, and it's fine, like shit happens, right? But even in that, they had a plan of, oh, this is the narrative we're going to go for. That person's no longer available. We couldn't get a backup. So it's like, okay, we're going to pivot the story. We're going to do this, and we're going to go down this route, and we're going to make it work. And I think that's also reflective of what happens in production. It happens with Thicc Radio. I'm sure it happens with your stuff as well. Shit will happen. Like you said, you could lose a model at 9 in the morning, and by midday a new person has lined up. Similar thing with the podcast. We will have that chop and change where certain guests will say they want to come on, people might change their mind, or because of scheduling conflicts, they can't record this week, so they have to record another week, which means the episode that was going to come out later has to now come out earlier. And things swivel on a dime. I mean, Tim, how do you find on your side of things with production, how do you find that you process that kind of stress when we have to?
I think honestly, for me, I handle it pretty well because I know that and I'm laughing because I think by this point everybody knows that James is really the workhorse of the pair of us. But I think I can adapt pretty easily to changes, and I've had to, and there are times when because of time zone difference, depending on who we're talking to in the world, like I may have to be up at the crack of dawn, but it's all for the product. So
I want to ask you here, I've because obviously I know that when I did like 3 days of shooting, there was scads of content, of statements and scenes and things that like they get left on the cutting room floor. What was that like on your end? Were there like key bits that you were wondering if they were going to leave it in? Was there anything that you thought, ooh, this would be a really interesting thing if they included it, but then they didn't?
Um, Not really, actually. I mean, obviously, they had to cut so much to make it, the little, whatever it was, 15-minute segment, 20-minute segment. But when the weekend that they filmed was FetishCon weekend. And so that is like such an insane weekend for me that I I feel like everything that needed to be covered ended up getting covered, and there wasn't a lot of stuff that didn't make it in, that was like of importance, I guess. But my my recollection of filming is a little bit hazy, just because that weekend was so insane.
I mean, I can reflect on a lot of moments with recording, and I think part of it was because, well, partly because of the podcast. Obviously, we have a lot of quips and ideas that are sort of quick to hand to sort of throw out there. Because of the pivoting with different scenes, it kind of felt like, oh, there are potential opportunities to talk about mental health, which, a line of
Mhm.
that gets included in my scenes. But then also we talked about societal acceptance. We talked about fat liberation. We talked about even the very notion of how we consider fat a fetish for the simple
Mhm.
fact that we don't see fat people as human because that's literally what it is. And no one wants to talk about how we are so prepared to dehumanize fat people, like fat people should be grateful for the opportunity. And just everyone moves on. They're like, yeah, it's fucking wild. I mean, was there anything, 'cause having watched the episode, was there anything from your end of things that you maybe wish had been included in terms of like whether you recorded a scene or a statement about it or not? Was there like an aspect of fetism that you really wish they would have focused on in the episode?
I really wish they would have focused on the different, like you were talking about, like the mental health aspect and the way that people react to fat people, and want to just dehumanize us so quickly, and how that kind of affects the kink itself. Because I do think that for some people it definitely plays a role, like especially with like the humiliation stuff, which, like, me personally, I love humiliation. That is
Okay.
like in my personal life, that is like number one.
Mm.
um Dear God. But I do feel like some of that comes from being dehumanized and teased and whatever. When I was, I mean, well, even still it happens. Like, I'm a scooter fatty, people are nasty to me all the time. But for so long that was like how I was treated, and it definitely took a sexual turn at some point. And I don't know, that wasn't covered, and I feel like that could be something that's interesting to talk about. And also the differences between like how the community has evolved over time, I guess, because it used to be much less of a community, and I feel like as it's grown, it's become so much more of a community than it used to be.
Mm.
It, I don't know. I don't know. Has that been your experience at all, or?
Well, to defer to you here, Tim, because you've been a part of the community since even before Grommr days, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah, do you
But let's put it in perspective. I'm not. This is not an age joke that James is making about me. Yeah. So I was on
like
Beefy
usual?
Frat. I was on Beefy Frat at I think I was 19 or 20. So and then Grommr came along, what, in 2010? So anyway, but hasn't it, was that the right year? Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, the point is like, yeah, back when I first logged onto the internet and became aware of the gainer community, it was just a collection of websites to me. Because I never heard anyone talk. I mean, occasionally, like if it was like a blog post, someone would say that like some gainers have met up at like a picnic or something like that they've done, but there wasn't community events going on at that point. So yeah, it just felt like everybody was separated by vast distances, and the only way anyone connected was solely on websites.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. And I don't know, like pre Phoebe, pre Fantasy Feeder, it was a lot of just forums that were super anonymous, and a lot of it wasn't even fetus focused. Like it was size acceptance, and we were kind of like the outlaws in that, because fetism isn't and size acceptance don't necessarily always jive.
mm. Now that's a topic because
Yeah.
I remember as the podcast has gone along, because I hadn't heard of NAFA necessarily when we first started, but obviously as you research, you learn about things. I became aware of them. And what was really interesting is the amount of people, because I asked a couple of people I knew at the time who were like, oh, you tend to know things. What are your thoughts on this? And people were like, NAFA made a fucking statement against feederism. And I was like, Jesus, like actively were like, this is gross. And they tagged me in links, and then the links were broken because obviously they've since taken it down. But I thought that was wild. Here is a group of people who are like, fat people are human, simultaneously making a statement that says, but don't forget, fat women apparently valueless and apparently always going to be victims. Like
Mm-hmm.
the true blatant sexism is crazy. But I don't know, they've taken it down, so hopefully they've issued a statement of apology somewhere. NAFA, if you're listening, feel free to reach out with that one. Um, but I would agree. I think things have definitely changed over the years. I mean, even insofar as like, with the Grokio sites, obviously those still are up, they still do their thing. But I know a lot of people, myself included, have moved off them entirely onto Instagram and Twitter. I refuse to fucking call it X. But even BlueSky to an extent, like using actual social fucking media to have actual social engagement, which I think is wonderful. It's really reframed, I think, how we connect with people in the online space. People are no longer just kept behind a static image. Now you can have phone calls with people, you can have video chat, develop true, like, connective relationships. Like, Tim, you and I weren't just co-hosts at that point. By that point, we'd really recognized that we became fast friends. And so when we met in person, it just made it all the more incredible to know that because of social media, we were able to have that. And I do think it's, as much as, yes, there is this thing about like kids being weird, like hashtag no kink at pride, like fuck off, what do you know? But also like, regardless of all that weirdness that's coming along, there's definitely, and it feels like that to me, like progress in the social sense. Like everything does feel a little bit more connected. Even things like this, having gainers and feedies have actual moments of communication and building friendships. Like, this is awesome. And I really hope, speaking this out in faith, we're going to have a lot more of this as the seasons roll on. So, ladies, straight men, listening, get on the show. Come and message us. Here's a question for you. I mentioned this a little bit before. When you develop into a producer and you make your own content, obviously you learn to put your own stamp on things. What do you feel sets an Ivy Davenport production apart from the rest?
Well, there's a couple things. The first is that I am pretty nuts about details and sets and all of that. Like, for example, today I have spent the first half of today trying to procure an oxygen tank. Which, like, there's a million different things you could use to just kind of fake it, but I'm like, no, I need the real thing. So definitely like my attention to detail, my production value. I have like a whole brick and mortar studio space in a strip mall, which I don't really know any other producers that have that, which I'm really fortunate to be able to have that. And it also allows me to keep my production value as high as it does. And yeah, I'd say production value and just my own general workaholic tendency and obsessiveness over my product, I guess.
I love that. Listeners, you can't see, but Tim's got a big old smirk on his face because he's obviously thinking about me and my anal retention when it comes to this stuff.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm totally I am preparing myself for the time when it actually does happen for us, and I know that I am gonna have to kick my ass into gear. Um, but like that's the dream, you know, because that's the same thing that we want. And I would love to be able to have studio space to be that creative in, because you know, this is still a creative process between me and James, but there's a lot of like technical sort of tedious writing and planning and other things that don't really access my creativity, you know. So like when those opportunities come along, I usually jump into them because like, okay, now I can be visual, I can be audio, I can do the things that I'm used to doing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just I love just the idea of being able to have that. It's like that's the goal for Thicc Radio someday.
Yeah, that was my dream for so long, was to have a dedicated studio space. Because I worked out of my home for like the first 17 years that I did this. I was like my home, hotels, Airbnbs, friends' houses. In the beginning, it was a dorm room. Um, and as you know, with getting my own space, I've been able to just like go absolutely nuts with everything that I do.
No, that's fantastic. And I mean, to put this out there for anyone, and I'm sure you probably get asked this question a lot, but for anyone who's thinking they want to take what they do to the next level, people who want to put more attention and effort into the production element of whatever gaining and fetus related it is that they do, what is something you'd say to that person?
If it is like video or photo, the first thing that I would say to upgrade would be your lighting, because good lighting can make a crappy camera look really a lot better. Lighting is probably more important than your camera that you're using almost. Uh, and you know, the other thing would be just consistency. That goes for like anyone, whether you're doing a podcast or a, you know, clips or a YouTube show or, you know, whatever it is. Consistency is so important. You can have a totally mediocre product, but as long as you're consistent, people will come, you know, they will come to you, they will watch, they will listen. And hopefully they'll give you the motivation to, you know, improve upon the product.
Absolutely. I mean, something we've been insistent on from the beginning is we post every Tuesday. Tuesday
That's
at the
awesome.
same time, you know, it has to be consistent and you have to develop a sense of, not to say loyalty, but it's like if people are going to tune in and listen, they have to trust that the program is going to be on every week at the same time. It's like classic TV. If it's not there, why would people go looking for it? If it's not on, they're going to go, oh, well, this is no longer there. And then they give up and they leave and they go, oh, well, it was nice while it lasted. So I think that's very important. And personally, I would come back to the simple things of set dressing. To every gainer out there who posts a really cute photo from your bedroom, please close the lid on your laundry basket and make your fucking bed. And if you're going to take a photo on the toilet, put the fucking seat down, wipe down that mirror. Just, I don't want to see you in like this unprepared environment because that's what takes my attention. I'm looking at the awful looking toilet that needs a scrub in the background. That's not what you wanted out of the attention of your photo. I don't know how fat you look, but I know that, you know, maybe you could use some Metamucil. Like that's the takeaway.
I love it whenever you bring this up because it really highlights the difference between you and me as to how we view some things. Like, because you know I'm an old slut. So immediately I'm just going to look straight at whatever it is they're offering. I don't give a shit what's around them. They could be in a landfill and I probably wouldn't notice. I'm such a
No,
man.
oh, that's great. No, I'm the same way. Like, it will ruin it for me if like the toilet seat's up or there's like crap on the nightstand, like dirty tissues and a condiment bottle. I'm like, what? This is not it. Even my content where I do like slob content, it's all like, it's curated to be slobby, but not disgusting, which I'm sure some people would rather it be disgusting. But, it's just, I don't know. It's, yes, clean up your environment for Christ's sake.
But also, that's the difference between being a slob and being disgusting. Maybe you're out there making specifically disgusting porn content, and that's the vibe. In which case, brilliant, make the space disgusting. But also, the same would apply in the opposite. You're out there trying to make disgusting content, but your space is clean. That's not selling the fantasy that's going to make you think, oh, this is disgusting. You're going to go, this is just, you could have tried harder. You know what I mean?
I knew you were a minimalist.
Minimalism, sweetie, minimalism.
See, that's the thing. This just opened up a whole new doorway, to like types of set dressing, like minimalism, slobism.
Maybe that'll be a future episode of the podcast, talking about styles of production. But bringing it back around to sex, actually, how do you feel it stacks up versus other documentaries on gaining and fetishism that you've seen? Be honest.
I honestly think it's better than a lot of them. I feel like as far as being informative about the fetish itself, it was pretty good at that. My angle was more about the production, so it wasn't as much about the kink itself, but more about like, the content and that kind of thing. So I feel like they didn't ask me as many like in-depth questions about fetishism and my thoughts on fetishism and how it applies to my life per se, as they probably asked you. But I feel like what they put out was pretty damn good, honestly. Like, and the people that they had on were all very informed, like very together. Like it was, I feel like they really chose the cast of the episode well.
Yes.
And there was an episode that my best friend Renee Starr, they did a documentary years ago, and the documentary was like, for the most part, it was pretty positive. It was going pretty good. We were really happy with how it had come out. And then the ending is, there's a super fat lady who is just in a bad way at the time, and it ends with like kind of a down note.
Wait, is this the eyeball? Hang on, I think I know the one. Is this Fat Girls and Feeders? Because if that's the one I'm thinking, because
no, it's a different one. It's oh my God, what is it? I cannot remember it, but it ends with the woman eating over a trash can, like in her wheelchair. And it was just like, this is not the ending that we needed. God, what was it called?
Listen, Fat Girls.
I'm surprised we haven't seen it yet.
It might be one of those ones that we just couldn't find a link for, like Fat Love. I think that was one where it was just like, we reached out to the production company, we reached out to the distributor, and we were like, does anyone have a copy of this? And people were like, ask the other person. It just went around in circles. So like that one is lost to the ages. But like, never forget Fat Girls and Feeders, where it was like, and I do not remember this woman's name, but she is just dead on the inside, staring blankly off into space, and it is just one long continuous shot of her eyeball, and then just pulls back until you see this, like, she looks like she's passed out, half comatose, and then you just see more and more of her looking destroyed. Like, I was just like, this is horrific.
Well,
I mean,
babe, this was the same documentary that chose to take their like one of the few male subjects that was in it and like frame him from under his, like, they were looking up his nose. The camera was aimed up his nose. I was like, who sets up a shot like that?
A BBW party, and literally all the dude was saying, he's like, yeah, I love BBWs and I love going to these parties because, yeah, obviously it's nice that these girls are, it's nice that these girls are all over me, but I get to be all over them and we have a good time. And you can hear the passion that he's actually like really loving it. But when it's framed from that down angle, you're just like, oh, this man looks really creepy. You know, it looks like they deliberately took shots of him in the back of a cab, but it's dark, so it makes him look like greasy, and it's just like, this
Yeah.
is so cheap and dumb. I've got to agree with you. Not to be facetious, I feel like this episode of Sex Actually was genuinely one of the best pieces on gaining and fetism I've ever even seen. And
I would agree.
it's really humbling to know that I've been a part of that, because I feel like there are so many people that have come before us who've participated and been really mistreated. And I'd like to think that in some small way, the reception that this has had and the way that it has gone is a reclamation for them, would be my hope.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you here, genuinely, and I'll ask this of both of you, what would you score the episode out of 10?
Well,
I
we're
feel
on it, so a 10, obviously.
I would also have said a 10. I mean, I didn't get to, oh no, I can't remember how. I did see it, but I don't remember how you had me watch it. But it was good. Like, it was good representation. Nothing about it seemed like it was unseemly or that they were trying to paint a particular picture of it. There wasn't any weird circus music. It was refreshing, actually.
Yeah. One of the moments that really stood out to me actually was, and I cannot remember any of the people's names, but it was the man, the slender man that was being interviewed, about his super chub. I can't remember if they were partners or if they were married, but they were just asking him the genuine question, like, how do you feel about her continual growth of size? And he had a moment where he was obviously like, it makes me feel a certain type of way because we have to navigate this, and I'm unsure. I've never been this dynamic before. And there was a little part of me that wondered, like, did we need to include this? And actually, I think we did, because obviously it's a question that everybody wants to fucking ask a fat person on any given day. A fat person goes for a jog in the park, and some dickhead is like, aren't you worried you're gonna fucking drop down dead? Like, so we get that bullshit already anyways, right? But I like that the person they asked was not some dude bro dickhead. It was like a person who's very emotionally invested in the longevity with their plus size partner. And the honest answer was there was no answer. There was a lot of emotion, there was a lot of feeling. But they clearly had a good open relationship where he had space to express that, and she held space for him to be vulnerable. And like that was just wonderful to see. Like the relationship focus of the episode wasn't just we get together, we smash and have sexy times. It's like, no, fat people are actually capable of heavily nuanced and dynamic relationships, because plot twist, we're actually just real fucking people, just like everyone else. So
Yeah.
I really like that part. What do you want to see out of future anythings to do with gaining and fetism? Do you want to see more books, podcasts, cinematic masterpieces? And what kind of topics and what aspects of gaining and fetism do you want to be addressed in these future projects?
I would love to see more representation of fetism in like a mainstream, like I'd love it. Like, did you guys see City Island?
No.
There's like a little subplot about fetism in it. And I would love to see that kind of a situation in other mainstream things. And I can't remember exactly how it was portrayed in City Island, but I don't remember being especially offended, so I think it was okay. But I would love to see, like in different shows, like they'll show like a fetish or something and it's just whatever. I would love to see fetism be that fetish that gets featured.
As would I. I was going to say the same thing. I would love to see it wind up in some kind of major Hollywood production that gets released to theaters that does not take the piss out of it, that doesn't turn it into let's all point at the freaks and laugh, that doesn't turn it into some sort of like horror situation either. Like, I don't want it depicted in a horror film.
The whale feet.
Or something like that. Like, I want to see it presented in exactly what it is. It is a positive light. People can shit on it all they want. This has been a positive thing for nearly everyone that has been involved in it. So I want to see it. I want to see it. And it can be a comedy. It can be a comedy as long as it's honest. And it's not like, like, oh, let's laugh at them rather than laugh with them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I would honestly, I would love to see it in a comedy. I would love it to be a subplot in a comedy where they're laughing with us because, kinks are ridiculous and fetism is no different than any of the other kinks. And I love that.
If I could pitch an idea to Hollywood, like it would be like, let's take something a la Sex in the City, but it's for kinksters of various backgrounds, sexualities, gender identities, and varying fetishes. Because there is so much crossover between gaining and fetism and other fetishes like BDSM, leather, rubber, inflation, so many avenues that this could go. And like maybe each character has a, one that's a little bit unique to them, but then they have others that sort of bleed into each other. And just honestly and frankly looking at the life of adult, relatively well-adjusted human beings who have fetishes.
Yeah,
Mm.
that would be cool.
That would be really awesome. I'm already picturing something like, those Christmas movies, romance, like Love Actually, where it's like it's a star-studded cast where there's like 12 to 16 main characters, but the whole plot is about how they're all somehow connected with one another and just exploring different facets of their lives. I think that would be a wonderful way to explore it because it would also help to explain how two different people may not have any concept of each other's existence, and yet we are interconnected through different sense of kink and fetish. And you can have people who are fully out there, loud and proud, being sluts, being fully every other weekend. And then you can have the people who have to keep it private because they're still processing shame. You can have people who are in therapy, learning to unpick and unpack that. You can have people who are dealing with aspects of kink or their transformed selves in the workplace. You can have all of those moments. I'd love to see examples of fat characters using cute little teasing motifs to other fat characters who are like, "Oh, come on, Porky, you gonna eat that donut, babe?" And like having a cute little moment. That's true reclamation, right? Because then, of course, people can laugh at the fat joke. They can laugh with us. They don't have to laugh at us. And I'd love to see more of it. I'd love to see more diversity in that space. I'd love to see more blending of not just people who are coming together for the sake of sex, but people who just have friendship. Like, that's a missing element in kink, I think, that people don't talk about a lot. Like, people who just want to be fucking friends and enjoy each other's company and have someone that you can just talk to who gets where you're coming from without having to uh, account for and predict and jump over all these flaming hoops of how to explain thousands of hours of conversation around kink and fetish and every other little aspect of it, right? Um, just quickly here, I want to ask you, is there any aspect of sex actually, or what you do with your production work that you want to specifically bring up and talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
I mean, I have been branching more into producing men, which I have absolutely loved doing. And it's something that I do want to continue to do because I mean, I like big guys. I mean, I like everyone, but I like big guys. And I've noticed that the amount of quality content out there of bigger guys, like there's just not a lot. Like, and I'm like, okay, well, I know how to do that. So if I can fill that niche too a little bit, I mean, why not go for it? So I've been branching out into that a little bit, trying to like produce content of big men that appeals to, both women and men, because why not?
You know,
Amen, because we need it. There is so very, very little of,
Yeah,
of good quality for, featuring supersized men or, just gaining in general, like it's still very amateur at this point.
yeah, I've definitely noticed that. And I'm like, well, I don't know how like gay men would feel about like, well, I'm a queer woman, but a queer person um that's not a man producing content for them. But at the same time, like it's been pretty well received. So I'm happy about that.
It's interesting you bring that up because there was a gainer artist on DeviantArt that got really, really, really popular. I don't know how many years ago it was, but the profile name they went by was Broken Cassette.
Mm-hmm.
And they made some incredible gainer art, and then at one point they decided to identify themselves, both like who they were and what their gender was, and it was almost the exact same fear, like, oh, will they accept it knowing that I'm not a gay man? It's not a gay man who's drawing these pictures, and no one gave a damn because the pictures were so fucking good. When the product is good, no one gives a shit who puts it out. Most people don't even know who produces good stuff. They're just scrolling through, they find what they want, they goon, and then it's over with.
Girl, Warren Davis. Ain't nobody know who the fuck Warren Davis is. Warren Davis could have been a lady. Who the fuck knows? Until Warren Davis identifies themselves or someone identifies the body, we don't fucking know. Like, this is a point I feel like we have come back to time and time again. Like, there is a question about sexism on the gayness side of things where it's like, oh, why do you want to talk to a feedee? Why do you want to do this? Bish, what's your problem? What do you think the issue would be there, honey? There's no ontological difference. What do you think that is if you want to bring that up? That sounds like you've got something there you want to work through. And there probably is a point to be made about, like, yes, content of men and content of women, but depending on how you produce it, do you produce it for the male gaze or for the female gaze? Because those are actually two completely different things, even if it is the exact same subject. The way it's framed, shot, lit, styled, both of those are entirely different, and honestly probably a whole episode in and of itself that we should come back to.
Yeah.
But all of this is so important, and I just feel honored that we get the opportunity to talk to you today, Ive. This has been
Aw.
freaking incredible, and I really hope we can have you back again sometime.
I would absolutely come back. You guys are so fun. And I have to say, like, I am really jealous of the gainer community over the
Why?
Okay, y'all have cruises, first of all.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Oh, No,
and it seems like you guys, I mean, I know there's drama, but it seems like y'all can hold it together a little bit better than the straight by whatever the feedy
Oh,
section.
so y'all get drama too? Because I don't really scroll through the feeds of Phoebe or Chaseable or anything, so I never really know what's going on.
I don't know anything about any drama. I've never been involved in any, so I wouldn't be able to comment on any of that, I'm afraid.
It's well, like I said, you know how it's stupid, but we always say it's comforting when we find out that shit happens on the other side of the fence too. It's like,
Yeah, very, very that. But
Yes.
honestly, speaking to a couple of feedies, honestly, shout out to Phoebe Danny, shout out to Els Belly, who we've had the privilege of having on the pod. Like, we need shit like this. Like, honestly, the fun we got to have on the cruise was amazing. But like, can you imagine how much better it would be? Like, we were 80 strong on the cruise that we went on together, Tim, just with the gay men. Can you imagine if like that opportunity was presented to all of the big beautiful women out there? Like, that whole cruise would have been stacked, bitch. Every fucking room. There wouldn't have been a bitch on that boat who wasn't one of us. That would have been incredible. And like, I don't know. I just feel like I would love the experience sometime soon. And this is a shout out to any lady peoples who are in the community in the UK. This is, not necessarily a thing about like anything sexy or anything, but just like people to hang out with where it could be, like at the pool. Y'all are looking cute in a bikini and I'm there chubbing out in a Speedo. And we're like gonna go and hoe down at the fucking McDonald's afterwards or like eat whatever the fuck we want. And we can just be chill and fat together. Like, I want to see that moving forward. More like blending of everyone together, because I actually reckon it would be a fucking kiki and a cut up and it would be fabulous, personally.
Oh my God, yes. I have joked. I'm like, well, the next Grommr of the Seas, I'm going. Like, y'all are just gonna have to deal with it. I'm just gonna come. Like,
Honestly, that would be fucking fierce. And bitch, if you end up going, you better fucking tell me. I will drop my savings onto that cruise
oh my God.
immediately, bitch. Immediately. That would be so fire. Oh my God. But this has seriously been so phenomenal. Thank you so much for being with us today. Now, where can our listeners find you online?
Oh my God. Y'all can find me on Twitter. What is my Twitter handle? I think it's BBW Ivy Davenport. Maybe. You love how I don't know any of my handles because I'm just so professional here. Yeah, BBW Ivy Davenport is my Twitter, and Ms. Ivy Davenport is my Instagram. And ivyandfriends.com is the quickest way to get to my clips.
Fantastic. Love it. Oh my goodness. That is it for yet another fantastic week here on the pod. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review, y'all. Now listen, if you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, pretty please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at ThiccyMouse. You can also look us up on Instagram and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/thiccradio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes. And you can always write to us at thethickradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats. Thanks for having me, guys.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stan and Vicky Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by Stannon.
Our artwork is provided by Logitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.